name is Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I build four-wheel trucks and travel to the remotest parts of the world. I'm a prisoner of this hill. I bought my white Land Rover One-Ten V8 in November 1989. I hadn't sold my Range Rover. I had kept my Range Rover for a while, for about 6 months after I took delivery of the One-Ten. And it was a V8 because, well, I don't remember what engines were available at the time. Probably the TD1, the TDI1, the first turbo diesel engine in the Defender, One-Ten, and it was a terrible engine. It really was turned out to be quite a good engine by the time they got to the TD2 and the TD3. But the V8 I knew very, very well. So V8 One-Ten was a natural choice. The first trip I took with it of any meaning was to the Coetzee Game Reserve with my girlfriend Gwyn. That's spelled Gwyn, by the way.
We're 70 k's from the Botswana border. It's the Easter weekend 1990. Andrew and I have been sharing our house with a whole lot of monsters who call themselves staff, and we're actually sick of it. So we've packed up our little car and the two of us are off to Coetzee. 4 days. Probably a little bit extravagant for 4 days, but nonetheless, it's what we feel that we need to do, to go and sit and do nothing except watch the circumference of the earth. And that's where we are. We're having breakfast. It's great. The map is very unclear and there are no signposts. This is probably one of the most exciting things about coming up to Botswana. Use the tree.
Like any good Land Rover fan, I collect memorabilia, but in South Africa it was in short supply, so whenever I went over to England I would fill up my suitcases with lovely brochures like these and bring them home with me, and I still have my collection today. In South Africa they did their best, and they had some interesting brochures as well, including this one here, Driving Techniques for Range Rover and Land Rover. Really not bad at all. And the brochure that I got before I bought my vehicle was this one. That's the sum total of my brochure. And of course they did publish later, when they called it the Defender, they published some more. And there's the Afrikaans one. And the English one, and they had some interesting bits and pieces in it. 45? I always questioned that. But anyway, what a great vehicle it was. Let's read here. Land Rover Limited pioneered the production of permanent four-wheel drive, which improves safety, versatility and handling. They did, but for a few other sedan car manufacturers. It reduces component and tyre wear and assists engine braking. Correct. It also simplifies the transmission to ensure that the vehicle is prepared in advance for any sudden unexpected hazard, and in effect permanent four-wheel drive enables every Land Rover to perform every function efficiently, consistently and reliability. They could have actually made a lot more of that, because it doesn't simplify the transmission, but it does help the vehicle in so many ways. And what makes the Defender really great is because it has a permanent four-wheel drive system. However, this caused a bit of a problem. Because of the permanent four-wheel drives, it was the first one with permanent four-wheel drive, apart from the Range Rover that had arrived 10 years earlier. But this whole idea of permanent four-wheel drive was just a problem, because the car is not in four-wheel drive. When the center differential is locked on a Land Rover One-Ten stroke Defender, stroke Range Rover early discoveries, the vehicle is actually not in four-wheel drive. What it's doing is it's splitting the drive to the front and back axles equally. So it's not two-wheel drive, but it's always also locked up four-wheel drive. When the vehicle drives off-road and wheels lift, there is different traction on different wheels and wheels will spin. You can take a permanently four-wheel drive Land Rover Defender and lift one of its wheels and it will spin and the vehicle will stop. So the problem with that is that when people would drive Land Rover Defenders on sandy terrain, thick sand tracks is typical, they would not lock the transmission because they think that the vehicle is in four-wheel drive. And the vehicle would struggle because the drive would go to that wheel, to that wheel, that wheel, that wheel, with no control, no electronic control at all. The drive would just shoot to any wheel that had the least traction, not the wheel that had the most traction, like traction control does, the wheel that has the least traction, because it spins and absorbs all the power. And I've been in situations when driving with people with Land Rover One-Tens and they have been sweating buckets. And I've had to say to them, did you lock our center transmission? No. Why? This is a misunderstanding. Why? You're not in four-wheel drive. It's permanent four-wheel drive. Yes, we'll talk about that over the campfire. Lock the center transmission and I'll explain it to you. Because then you're getting equal front and back. In other words, when one of the front wheels spins out because it loses traction, one of the Mack wheels is linked directly to it, either one of them via the differential. So you will have the same amount of rotational speed in one or both of the Mack wheels and vice versa. So immediately you're doubling the amount of tractive force on the ground by locking that central transmission. It is exactly the same as engaging four-wheel drive on a part-time system where I'm driving normally in, say, rear-wheel drive. I drive down the street, get onto a gravel road or sand, and I lock it, put it into four-wheel drive. It locks the front and back. I now have the equivalent with the Land Rover Defender. But the big advantage of that is that I can drive in a semi-four-wheel drive, permanent four-wheel drive state, with an open center differential on vehicles like the 110. And I can do that on tarmac. The advantage of that is really significant, particularly when it gets slightly slippery, when you don't want to put it in four-wheel drive, you don't want to lock the center differential. But the braking is more equal, handling, it changes the handling of the Defender utterly. I've driven one in two-wheel drive. It's not a very nice vehicle to drive in two-wheel drive. Range Rover is even worse. It depends on that center transmission for its handling. And it makes an enormous difference. That was a difficult thing to teach when I did my 4x4 videotapes. And the first time I tried to do it was with my Defender. And in fact, it's on tapes 5 and tape 2. And it made it onto the cover of our second four-wheel drive Trails book. During that same morning, I climbed the hill and shot this picture for the cover of this book. Photographed in the Richtersveld in northwestern South Africa.
Ferried up the mountain in 2 ships.
And yes, it was our wedding car. Tomorrow, another vehicle that gives me goosebumps. In fact, it's probably the vehicle that gives me the most goosebumps, the G-Wagon. I had 2 of them. One video every day until Christmas. Subscribe and hit the little bell notification button.